I'm squinting.
Hello and welcome to the 49th episode of PEM Podcast, the Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my co-host, my fabulous sister, Sandy. First of all, I just want to say we've been having a lot of fan love lately, and it delights me. It delights me. There was one comment in particular that I absolutely loved. Someone commented on my sister's hair, which is gorgeous. And they said, chef's kiss. So Sandy and I actually have an inside joke about this Swedish chef. So anytime we're like in the middle of making a recipe, we just send gifs of the Swedish chef. So from the Muppets, that's it. And then you got me a t-shirt once with Never gets old. Never gets old. How's your week going? It's Sunday. So how's your week going?
I guess
8 hours it's been already.
It's been busy. Yeah, lots going on. Lots going on. And
boys in town, out of town. They're
international travel. So it's not the safest places on the planet, and I'm a little nervous. And they're in separate locations.
They're fine.
Thank you, psychic sister, for letting me know they're fine. I'm sleeping a little bit better at that, but there's a whole mom group of us that are like, exchanging texts, who got a picture of who, what, where, when, why, how.
Is this going to continue for the next 8 years until they're 30? Or
I don't think,
some point
I'm not the only one who gets ignored by her son. So
of course not.
Fill in the blanks. And then there's one poor mom was like, I've gotten no pictures. So we all started sending her photos.
Gotcha.
Sad.
Well, cool. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. I was telling Sands before we started recording that I'm going to be a little muted today. Time change, long run, clients. I'm tired. So, yes, the world's tiniest violin for me. Anyway, okay. So anecdote, I'm going to start with an anecdote because I loved this, particular reading. Apparently it was on the second, that I read for this woman. I'm starting to take notes afterwards, which is helpful. Anyway, so this woman's father came in first, and he gave me a bunch of proof that it was him, and then he kept showing me a handwritten letter in a frame on a wall. And so I asked her, I said, did he ever write you a letter and you framed it and put it on the wall? And she said, no. But she used to write poetry, and her father loved one of her poems. So he rewrote it in his handwriting and framed it. So she's got that on the wall, right? So
let me just interrupt for a second. Was she like second grade handwriting, and therefore he needed to like?
No. He had it first. He had it first because he loved it. And then when he passed away, she put it on her wall.
Got it. Okay.
Which I thought was just beautiful. Maybe it was second grade hand. I don't know. Maybe he had pretty kind one. I don't know.
Kid art. Who knows?
Yeah. F. And then her husband came in, and immediately he connected me to the 4th of July. So I said, what's the connection between your husband and the 4th of July? Well, he passed away from COVID, and they couldn't have a funeral for him because it was early COVID. So they recently, on the 4th of July, just did a celebration of life, which I thought was cool. And he kept like doing fireworks in the back of my mind. And then he kept talking about Netflix. And so I kept saying, I think you need to watch Netflix or something. And turns out that there's a movie with Tom Hanks called A Man Called Otto. And the movie is about a man who loses his spouse and is just devastated. So she had seen the commercial for it, and she had this feeling like, maybe I should watch that. And then she thought, I don't know if I'm ready. And so this was his nudge, like, you're ready. You can do it. And the whole story of A Man Called Otto is about a man kind of finding the life after heartbreak, total heartbreak, devastation. So she was an absolutely lovely client, and her whole family was just like, there were a lot of them there. It was great. It was awesome. And then I have another really little quick one, because this is kind of funny. So as you may or may not know, I don't know if this is the first time you're watching us, and you may not know how my brain works when I'm in medium mode, but pretty much there's no English exchanged between me and those crossed over loved ones. So I have to interpret the pictures that get shown to me. So I was reading for a woman, and her brother-in-law had passed away, and he came through, and there lots of proof again that it was him. It was great. And then he showed me the emoji, the angel emoji with the little baby. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Like there's a little baby emoji angel. And so my mind says, oh, he lost a child. There was either a stillbirth or maybe a baby had died. And so I asked her, I said, did he have a daughter that was born stillborn, or a miscarriage, a late miscarriage, something like that? And she said, no. And I said, okay, well, he's showing me an angel. And so she panics and she goes, he has a daughter named Angel, but she's still alive. Is she going to die? I'm like, oh my God, no, no.
That would have been my reaction. Absolutely, 100%.
Right?
Right there.
Like, boom,
Yeah.
tragedy. So I had to like back that one up and be like, try and explain, this is why he showed me that. Because, I'm not hearing them. He's not saying my daughter Angel, so he has to show me something. So I thought that was hilarious. And sweet. Let's face it, that's really sweet. So, it's a definite way to get me to say her name, which I thought was very, very clever. They're so clever over there. They really are. And had a really good week with a lot of great readings where, sometimes the relatives come in and they are chatty Cathys and it's awesome. And then other times they come in, you give them a mic and they just kind of stand there. They prove to you who they are, and that's about it. There's not a lot of meat on the bone. So I have no control over who comes through, but man, am I glad when chatty Cathys come in. It's so much more fun. So anyway, and then book promotion. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Yay! What a Ghoul Wants. And I was just telling Sandy, this should have been What a Ghoul Haunts, would have been more clever. This is my bad. I came up with all the titles. Anyway, this one, when I was writing it, really creeped me out. There are a couple of scenes in it when I was writing it, and I was like, wow, this is dark. This is scary. It's delicious. So MJ, Heath, and Gilly and the rest of the film crew travel over to Wales, Scotland. I can't remember. Wales or Scotland. I think it's Wales. They travel to Wales. Sandy, it was 15 years ago I wrote this. Don't give me that.
Book promotion. I don't know where it took place or when it
Yeah.
happened, but
God,
hey,
I
read
don't
it.
really
You'll
remember.
enjoy
It's in
it.
Wales. Wales. So they travel to Wales. Scotland, Wales, tomato, tomato. If you're from the UK, don't hate me. We used to live there, so they were very close together. Anyway, Sandy, stop. Anyway, MJ.
Kansas, Kentucky, who cares, right?
They moved all the K's together in the United States. It's like, what was the comedy special I told you to watch? Kathleen Mulligan, right?
I don't know.
Oh, I think it's Kathleen Mulligan.
Wait.
I think.
But the book promotion is
not Kathleen.
not happening.
Not happening. Anyway, Heath, MJ, Gilly, Peanut Gallery, shut up. Travel to Wales, and the rest of the film crew, they travel to Wales, and there is a legend of a ghost, female ghost, woman who was the lady of the castle, who went insane, and so she was imprisoned in a wing of the castle that is absolutely off limits to everybody else. But she's been supposedly responsible for drowning a couple of people in the castle moat. And so she, of course, when they arrive, she, of course, is active again. And they have to kind of figure it out whether or not it's her doing all the murders in the castle, or if she's got some earthly help. Hint, she's got some earthly help. So anyway, so that's What a Ghoul Wants. Yeah, part of the MJ Ghost Hunter Mystery series. That's it for me.
Fantastic. Well, I think one of the things that encourages me about you always saying everyone's so clever on the other side is that maybe there's no dumbness on the other side.
Oh, there's
Maybe
plenty.
there is. Okay.
There's plenty.
Plenty
Yes,
of
there's
dumbness.
plenty. Yeah, it's, I think one of the biggest revelations for me in interacting with them consistently is that there is no omnipotence. You don't just go to the other side and suddenly you know everything. Certainly you have access to information much more readily than we do, even with our internet. So the basic thing over there is that there is no lying or denial. The truth is as pure as the truth can be. So you can't wrap yourself in a bubble of I'm wonderful, because the real you is constantly exposed. So they're not speaking with each other, it's telepathic. So if you try to lie, people would be like, you're lying. You're lying. I can tell you're lying right there. It says
No
you're lying.
nose growing. You're just
No,
lying.
no,
Yeah.
you're just flat out lying. Yeah.
Just flat out lying.
But personalities remain really the same, really the same. Now they can, I always tell people, listen, you're going to work on your shit here, or you can work on it there. There's no get out of jail free card. You've got to face your shortcomings and where you failed, especially here, where you failed another person, or where you failed in your mission in life. And oftentimes I see souls from the other side who are working through that process, and it's difficult. They kind of come forward and they're like, this sucks. This is unpleasant. So, work on your shit here, guys. Work on your shit. Whatever it may be, just work on yourselves. This is what this whole life is about. It's an opportunity to kind of grow as a soul. So that's my soapbox
Thank you.
speech.
Thank you. Thank you for your soapbox.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we have a really interesting case to share with you today. It's called the Lady of the Dunes, which recently came to back into the news media because this was the longest unidentified murder victim in the state of Massachusetts. And through DNA testing, they finally figured out who this victim was. So I thought it was very intriguing. Okay, now we know who she is. Let's dive into the case. So that's what today's mystery is about. And it starts on July 26, 1974. 12-year-old Leslie Metcalf came upon a gruesome discovery as she chased a barking dog along Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Mass. After spotting the dog sniffing at a large unidentified object, Leslie thought it might be a deer carcass, but as she drew closer, she realized to her horror that in fact it was a decomposing human body. The remains were just yards away from a road and had significant amount of insect activity. On-scene authorities determined that the victim, a woman, may have died 2 weeks beforehand. She was found laying face down on half of a beach blanket. A blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans were propped under her head. Her long auburn hair was pulled back into a ponytail by a gold-flecked elastic band, and her toenails were painted pink. Police determined that the woman was approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighed about 145 pounds, had an athletic build, and was between the ages of 20 and 40. She also had dental work, including crowns worth about $5,000 to $10,000, which dentists called the New York style of dental work. Several of her teeth had been removed. Both hands and one forearm were also missing. Investigators speculated that the missing teeth, hands, and forearm meant the killer wanted to obscure either the victim's identity or their own. On-scene authorities did not recover a murder weapon, although they did discover 2 sets of footprints that led to the body, as well as a set of tire tracks about 50 yards from the corpse. However, there was no sign of a struggle, so police theorized the female victim either knew her killer or had been asleep when she died. The sand and beach blanket where the body was discovered was not disturbed, suggesting that the body was possibly moved to that specific spot. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding dunes, no other evidence was found. After examining the body, the coroner determined that the woman had been nearly decapitated, possibly from strangulation. One side of her head had been crushed, possibly with a military-type entrenching tool, and the sustaining head wound was ruled the cause of death. There were also signs of sexual assault, likely post-mortem. Police pored over thousands of missing person cases and reviewed a list of vehicles permitted to drive through the area, but no matches were found. With limited evidence and no one to claim the body, in October of 1974, the female murder victim was buried in St. Peter's Cemetery in Provincetown, Mass. Shortly after that, the case went cold. And then in 1979, in an attempt to identify the Lady of the Dunes, her skull was retrieved for facial reconstruction with clay. Despite circulating images of what the victim may have looked like, no one stepped forward to identify the victim. Police did, however, investigate several leads, including the daughter of a Canadian man claimed she saw her father strangle a woman in Massachusetts around 1972, but attempts to locate the woman in question were unsuccessful. Another woman claimed the reconstruction of the victim looked like her sister, who had disappeared in Boston in 1974. Investigators also followed a lead involving escaped convict Rory Jean Kissinger, who was 25 years old at the time of the Lady of the Dunes murder and resembled the victim. However, DNA from Kissinger's mother did not match the murder victim. And two other missing women, Frances Ewalt of Montana and Vicki Lamberton of Massachusetts, were also ruled out. In 1980, the remains of the Lady of the Dunes were exhumed for examination, but no new clues were uncovered about her identity. The body was exhumed again in March of 2000 for DNA testing, but again, it did not generate any findings. In May of 2010, a CT of the victim's skull was carried out to produce images, which were then submitted to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for another attempt at facial reconstruction, but that also netted no results. Oddly, in August of 2015, speculation arose that the Lady of the Dunes may have been an extra in the 1975 film Jaws, which had been shot off the coast of Massachusetts on Martha's Vineyard about 100 miles south of Provincetown between the months of May and October 1974. Joe Hill, the son of author Stephen King, brought this to police attention after watching the film's 4th of July beach scene and spotted a woman in the crowd wearing a blue bandana and jeans like those found on the murder victim. Although authorities' interest in the lead had been noted, others involved in the case have described that theory as very far-fetched and wildly speculative. In 2022, the victim's skeletal remains were sent to the Othram, which is a Texas-based corporation specializing in forensic genealogy to resolve unsolved murders and disappearances. And from these, a DNA profile was generated to discover distant relatives and eventually identify the Lady of the Dunes. On October 31st, 2022, the Boston FBI field office announced that the victim had been identified as Ruth Marie Terry, who was 37 years old at the time of her death. No details of any potential suspects were disclosed, nor any reason why Ruth was in Massachusetts at the time of her murder. The case is currently being investigated as a homicide by the Massachusetts State Police. Ruth Marie Terry was born on September 8, 1936, in a mountainside shack in Whitwell, Tennessee, about 25 miles northwest of Chattanooga, to her father, Johnny, and her mother, Eva Terry. Eva died at the age of 23, and in 1956, Ruth married Billy Ray Smith, but the short-lived marriage ended in divorce. She left Whitwell the following year to work at the Fisher Body Automotive Plant in Livonia, Michigan. In 1958, at the age of 22, she gave birth to her son, Richard, but because she was financially unstable, Ruth allowed the superintendent of her workplace, Richard Hanchett Sr., to adopt her son in exchange for paying off her expenses and debts. After the adoption process was finalized, she left Livonia and moved to California. In 1972, when her son Richard was 13 years old, Ruth reached out in hopes of reconnecting, but to her dismay, she learned her son was hospitalized after he had suffered a drug overdose, which left him comatose for 18 days. 2 years later, in 1974, Ruth married antiques dealer Guy Muldavin in Reno, Nevada. Shortly after the wedding, the couple set off across the United States to do some antiquing. And in March of 1974, the couple stopped in Ruth's hometown to visit with her family. Ruth's grandniece, Brittany Novoglaski, was in the company of her husband, and she noticed that Guy was very possessive of his wife and seemed to isolate Ruth from her relatives. After departing from Whitwell, Tennessee, the couple traveled to Chattanooga to visit with Terry's half-brother Kenneth and his wife Carol. The Terrys later recalled that Ruth and Guy planned to continue their antiquing across several states, which included a stop in Massachusetts. Toward the end of the summer of 1974, Guy Muldavin returned to Tennessee, but without Terry. Without Ruth, and he told Ruth's family that she had gone missing from the couple's California home and claimed he did not know where she was. That was the last time the family saw Guy or heard about Ruth. Suspicious of Guy's flimsy explanation about Ruth's whereabouts, her brother James traveled to California to look for his sister, and when his efforts proved fruitless, he hired a private investigator to find Ruth. The investigator discovered that all of Ruth's belongings had been sold, and it appeared that she'd left California of her own free will. The investigator also told the family that Ruth had become involved in a religious cult. While the family continued to try and determine what had become of Ruth, there was no sign of their relative after 1974. 2 days following the FBI announcement of Ruth Marie Terry's identity on November 2nd, 2022, the Massachusetts State Police declared that they were seeking information on Ruth's now deceased husband, Guy Rockwell Muldavin, and the possible connection to Ruth's murder. And that was for good reason. Born October 27, 1923, Guy Muldavin was an orphan who was adopted by Abram Albert Muldavin and Sylvia Lily Muldavin. Guy was schooled in Switzerland, Connecticut, and New York, as well as tutored privately on his family's cattle ranch in Tiberia, New Mexico. Records show that in 1942, Guy was living in Manhattan, New York, and working as a professor at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts after being disqualified from active military service during the Second World War due to an ear infection. On May 11, 1946, Guy married Joellen May Loop, a former beauty pageant contestant and model in Bellevue, Pennsylvania. The couple lived in New York, California, and finally Seattle, Washington, and upon arrival, Guy took a job in the Seattle Bon Marché furniture department and opened a large antique shop. After 10 years of marriage, the couple divorced in July 16, 1956. 2 years later, Guy, now known as Raoul Guy Rockwell, married Manslita Aileen Ryan on September 30th, 1958, in Idaho. Manzi had an 18-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, Dolores Ann Mearns. Manzi and her daughter disappeared in Seattle, Washington on April Fool's Day in 1960, and Raoul Guy Rockwell was the prime suspect. Local police found bits of human tissue and dismembered human body parts located in a newly sealed septic tank at the home where Rockwell, his wife, and her daughter lived and operated an antique shop. But they were unable to prove the remains belonged to either of the missing women, nor were they able to connect the filings to Guy Muldavin or Guy Rockwell. Despite their suspicions, he was never charged, as the Kings County elected prosecutor was reluctant to pursue the case without a confirmed body of a victim. On July 26, 1960, Guy divorced Manzi on a desertion charge, and 3 days later, he married Evelyn Marie Emerson on July 29, 1960, in King County, Washington. 5 days later, he received a cashier's check for $10,000 from Evelyn's stepmother, Ms. Germaine Winkler, to buy antiques for a quick resale in Canada. Shortly thereafter, after fleeing Seattle for New York with his mother-in-law's money, Guy was arrested by the FBI to face larceny charges for swindling Evelyn's family. In 1961, he was convicted of those charges and was sentenced to 15 years. But after only 15 months in prison in March of 1962, a judge suspended the sentence and provided that Guy repay the money he stole. So on August 10, 1963, Guy and Evelyn married for a second time in Los Angeles. We now know that Guy married Ruth Marie Terry in March of 1974, and property records show that he was no stranger to Provincetown, Mass., as his parents bought land and properties in town in the late 1940s and mid-1950s. In addition to being a prime suspect in the disappearance of his second wife, Manzi, and her daughter, Dolores, and the brutal murder of Ruth Marie Terry in 1974, Guy Muldavin is also a prime suspect in the June 1950 murder of a 28-year-old bread truck driver, Henry Lawrence Baird, also known as Red, of Eureka, California, and the disappearance of his 17-year-old waitress girlfriend, Barbara Jo Kelly of Fortuna, California. Barbara was last seen in Humboldt County, California on June 17, 1950, after going out on a date that evening with her boyfriend, Red Baird. The following morning, Red's body was discovered on a beach near Humboldt Bay in Table Bluff County Park, lying face down, naked with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Red was, however, still wearing his shoes and socks, and Barbara's clothing was found carefully folded and tucked underneath Red's clothing in a neat pile off to the side of his body. Oddly, Barbara's shoes and socks were missing, and no trace of Barbara has ever been found. Authorities believe that whoever shot and killed Red kidnapped Barbara. Coincidentally, Guy Muldavin worked as a short-order cook in one of the two restaurants that his in-laws, the parents of Joellen May Loop, his first wife, owned and operated in Fortuna. Red delivered bread to both eateries, and Barbara Jo Kelly worked at the family's second restaurant in Fortuna. While there's little to no evidence connecting Guy Muldavin to the death of Red and the disappearance of Barbara, the similarities between the crime scenes of Red and Ruth's murders and the disappearance of Manzi and Dolores has authorities considering the possibility that Guy Muldavin was a serial killer. Guy Muldavin died on March 14, 2002, in Salinas, California, at the age of 78. His widow, Phyllis Roper, passed away in 2021. Guy has been described by the media as a sometime actor and DJ in California, an antique dealer in Seattle, and a bunco artist and great lover everywhere he went. The New York Daily News reported that he had 3 wives and many sweethearts, and by 1960 was known around Greenwich Village for his nightly soirees with beatniks, art lovers, celebrities, and celebrity hunters, all bound by Moldavin's magnetism and offbeat personality. One other convicted felon, Hayden Clark, has confessed to Ruth Marie Terry's murder. In 2004, Clark sent a letter to a friend stating that he had killed a woman on Cape Cod and enclosed 2 drawings, one of a handless naked woman sprawled on her stomach and another of a map pointing to where the body was found. Authorities say Clark suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, which inspired his false confession. Clark also claims that he murdered several other people, up to 20 victims, between 1970 and 1990. Following the death of his parents, Richard Hanchett, Ruth's son, began searching for his biological family and took an Ancestry.com DNA test in 2018. That test eventually connected him with the Terry family in Tennessee, and only then to learn that his mom had vanished and was still missing. Following the discovery of Ruth's identity, Richard told NBC News reporters, "I'm 64 years old. I didn't think I'd ever figure anything out, and then to find out she was lost, it hurts. A horrible thing happened to my mom in a beautiful place. She was a beautiful person, and I wish I could have gotten to know her." My sources for this story include Wikipedia, The Lady of the Dunes, NBC 10 Boston. He finally found his mom. She was the long unknown murder victim, Lady of the Dunes, by Kathy Curran, 12/2/22. NBC 10 Investigators, Man-Eyed and Lady of the Dunes Murder Had a Dark Side, by Kathy Curran, 11/11/22. UPI Archives, Once Wealthy Antique Dealer Sought in Disappearance of Wife, 12/160. And The Independent, Lady of the Dunes' late husband has been linked to 2 other deaths. Now his friend speaks out, by Sheila Flynn, 11/4/2022. So, was Guy Muldavin responsible for Ruth Marie Terry's death?
For sure. Yeah. This guy has every hallmark, every indication that he was absolutely a serial killer. I think that the whole traveling the country looking for antiques was a very convenient cover for him. And he obviously was a handsome man and had charisma, etc., just like any psychopath might have. So the interesting thing, though, Sans, is the Hayden Clark, who confessed to Ruth's murder. He provided a map and a sketch of
Yes.
Did the map point to her location?
I don't know. The information I got was what I just shared, and there wasn't much more that it's not that I dove deep into that fact. Because he suffered from schizophrenia and the authorities kind of dismissed his confession, I didn't pay much attention to it.
I think it's probably that he might have had access to that description, and was claiming it as his own. Because for me, it's Guy. That's the guy. Guy's the guy. The woman that he married twice, do you know what happened to her?
No, I think she continued to live unscathed, but
so he eventually divorced her, I'm assuming.
That's my understanding. Like, I had a hard time tracing all of the different women he was involved with, because he kind of traveled the country, and he was known to be one way in New York and another way in Seattle and California. So as far as I know, Ruth Marie Terry and his second wife, Manzi, were the only 2 deaths theoretically connected to Guy Muldavin. The woman that he had been married to for 10 years never suggested that she thought anything was off about him. And then it comes to light that her family's restaurant had the bread truck driver and waitress that disappeared at the time that Guy was, courting first wife and working at the restaurant.
Well, she would have been good cover for him.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that he likes to build layers of cover, or he liked to build layers of cover. I think that there are a number of other murders probably attributed to him. I've no doubt this guy, had a series of a few decades where people disappeared when he was traveling through town. It would be interesting, time consuming for sure, and I don't know if it's even possible, but to trace his travels when he was going through the country looking for antiques and see if there were any missing women in the area when he was kind of around the time that he was in town, because he just speaks to me to have many more victims than just the known ones, the ones that we can sort of connect to him. The whole ritual of laying her face down on her clothing, folded neatly, and the same thing done with red. I think that was sort of some of these guys, when they pose their victims, they make it like art, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my masterpiece, or this is, you know, this is my newest painting, which is so macabre and it's so cold. But then again, that's by definition what a psychopath is. They feel no remorse, they feel no regret, they have no conscience, but they would probably feel a sense of ownership and pride. So yeah, it's really unfortunate that he died, you know, just of natural causes and an old ripe age, and really didn't pay for any of this. It's what, then again, we just talked about. You either work on your shit here, you work on your shit there. There's no doubt in my mind, excuse me, there's no doubt in my mind that he's over there and probably experiencing not a good fun time.
That would be my hope. Yeah. Do you think that he pulled Barbara's body, the waitress, out into the ocean?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because that was my immediate thought, that he murdered her and then just pulled her out to sea and let, you know, the fishes do their thing. He might have taken her to a separate spot, but it's so interesting that you picked up that she was in water, because that's exactly where I felt she went.
Yeah.
So yeah. Creepy case. It's
Very,
creepy.
very.
Creepy.
But at least there's an understanding by the Terry family at this point about what happened to their sister, their loved one.
Right.
And I mean, now they know where she ended up,
right?
You know, instead of just missing.
Right. You have to also give the police a lot of credit for Manzi and her daughter's disappearance, for digging up a septic tank.
Yeah.
You know, that's effort. So there must have been something. There must have been something where they were like, you know, this is newly sealed or something, and they unsealed it, and then they went fishing.
Well, my understanding is that the antique shop was like at the sidewalk level, and then they had a home or an apartment above the antique shop. So I'm assuming the septic tank was out back. Maybe
it wasn't buried.
I don't know. I don't know where it was. Yeah. I don't know where it was or what prompted them to dig it up either. But I thought it was an interesting, convenient. Here's the antique shop, and then the residence upstairs.
So he obviously probably raped Manzi's daughter.
That's my guess.
You know, found out about it or whatever, confronted him, and then everything escalated. So really, I feel so bad for women who get involved with these narcissistic psychopaths, malignant narcissists, basically. So someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Always. Yeah.
So
okay.
Anyway, this was a great case, honey. I know that it was lots of layers, and you wrote it up beautifully. Really, it was easy to follow. The way that you wrote it up, and it wouldn't have been. I would have been like meandering back in Kansas and Kentucky,
Scotland, Wales, whatever.
Wales, Scotland. I don't know. Someone died.
An ugly death.
Yes, exactly. So well done, honey. Well done. Anyway, all right. Well, that's it. That's all we've got. Thank you for tuning in. As always, thank you, fans, for all your wonderful comments. We really, really appreciate them. We giggle a lot, we smile a lot, and we feel your love. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. And check out me and my books, or book a session for private reading with me via my website, victorialaurie.com. And that's all I got. All right. Jazz hands.
Oh, sorry. It's like this.
Yeah. When does it go?
I know.
Anyway, all right. I love you, love you, love you. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.